otro mundo más allá. Hi there. So, the guys I've been teaching Qigong to in the morning are making food right now that will be ready very soon. Making fish on the grill. I cut up some garlic and tomatoes and avocado as you do. My fingers smell delicious. But I told them, well, I've been promising to do a talk every day at this time, and that's how you develop some sort of following, is to have some sort of regularity. And so I've been telling everybody every day this week. I don't know if anybody knows that, but every day this week I'm doing a talk at this time. So hi everybody. Somebody sent me a message asking me to talk about traveling. And I posted the questions that he asked me at the beginning of this talk, which I'm going to reference occasionally. So I might not see your questions until I have answered those. And I'll be interrupted by my friends who have been making me food. I'm sitting down below. If any of you watched the yoga video yesterday, I was interrupted by one of the people managing the place I'm staying, who are very not hippie, and they were unhappy that I was doing yoga in a place that wasn't being used for anything. A little drama. So, work through emotions. I felt like crying afterwards. Very violated. But I've been bathing myself in music today and doing domestic duties and cleaning and feeling better. So, traveling. It's very nice to talk about traveling because none of us can travel right now. Now is the exact wrong time to be traveling. Everybody knows what's going on right now. So I don't really need to elaborate on that. But it is funny that when this world lockdown situation started, a lot of people were reflecting on oh fuck, what's happening to my way of life? What can I do? Blah, 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 blah. And I am somebody who always says we live in this rare window of history where we can travel all over the world, and how lucky it is that you can get on a plane for rather inexpensively and just fly anywhere and go into other cultures. And not a lot of people take advantage of it, but it's a fascinating, wonderful time to live. Because we don't know if that's going to return. We don't know what's going to return right now. So, right now, I've traveled down here, and I guess you can kind of say the makeup of that is how do you plan your trips? I had planned last winter to spend the winter in Florida, hanging out with my friends who have an exotic animal sanctuary farm, and they have a little cabin, and I was going to help them do some work, but I wasn't even going to be necessary for that. So it would have been really cush that I wouldn't have had to do work. They had people doing the work. I would just be helping. And then I'd do some writing, and I'd do some teaching, and whatever else unfolded. I thought it would just be a nice way to spend the winter. But instead, a week before I was planning to leave, I was meditating and decided to go to Thailand to take a teacher training. And I bought a one-way ticket. I had no idea. You've heard this story before, some of you, but this is about my mode of traveling. I bought a one-way ticket. I knew I was doing the teacher training. I didn't know what else was going to happen. While I was there, a friend that I hadn't seen in many years, but we keep in touch through Facebook, messaged me that he was coming to Thailand just to change a flight for a couple of days before going to Laos to take a month-long training for Thai massage. And I said, can I do that? And he said, well, it's full, but you can get on the wait list. And of course, there was a spot for me. And then I always wanted to see Cambodia and Angkor Wat, so I went and did that. And then somebody there told me about a meditation retreat in Thailand, so I went back to Thailand. I tell this little outline to illustrate that I have gotten to a point right now, because I've been doing this most of my life, to make some plans and have some intentions and let all the details percolate. And for the most part, as long as I trust that that will work out, it does. So that's something that took me a while to develop. So we'll go back to some earlier traveling stories. How did I become a traveler? Why did I become a traveler? I grew up in rural Indiana and found it unpleasant. I did not enjoy being there. I had a whole bunch of criticisms and unhappiness about it. And kind of threatened my parents that I was going to kill myself or run away and they would never see me again if they didn't help me leave. And I got to go to England on foreign exchange and live with a family, although the first family I lived with kicked me out for being too individual and free thinking. And then I lived with another family who were very kind, and their only rules were like, if you're going to be in past 2, give us a call and don't come home too drunk every night. Oh, and by the way, this house used to be a whorehouse. It was a totally different level of freedom, and especially a very different level of freedom than where I grew up in Indiana, because there was public transportation. So I could like walk to a train and it could take me all over the city, and then it could take, because I was in England, it would take me to the main train station, which I could go anywhere in England, or Scotland for that matter. So that's kind of how I started traveling. I didn't travel a lot growing up. Well, that's not true. In a Gemini way, I was going back and forth between Indiana and Michigan, because all of our family was in Michigan. So it was Indiana, Michigan frequently growing up. So there was a momentum there, but that's not a large scope. That's not a lot of variety. We had a couple family trips to like maybe Florida and Washington, D.C. come out of my mind. But the England experience was the first time when I could get on public transport and be like, instead of eating lunch, I'm gonna save my money so I can buy a train ticket to go to this record fair happening in Birmingham to see if I can find a limited edition 7-inch. So you know, there's always some kind of motivation that makes you travel. Like, what do you want? What is your goal there? Just having that, whatever, maybe 7 or 8 months when I lived with the second family, to just do basically whatever I want. They didn't really care if I went to school. And as soon as I realized that the school wouldn't translate into a degree, I would still have to take night classes to graduate from high school when I got back to America, I just pretty much stopped going to school, A levels. And I traveled around England, went to Paris for a little while, but mostly was in the UK. When I came back to America, I realized I hadn't seen much of America, and decided to travel around Indiana to try to see Indiana and a little bit of Illinois and Kentucky and Michigan. And this was the early days of the internet, so I also spent like 16 hours a day on the internet, chatting with people in rooms, and getting to hear desires, you know, a lot of gay chat rooms, IRC, if you remember IRC. I would spend hours, 16 hours a day, I remember for a while when I first got on IRC. It was literally just like wake up, do some push-ups, get on the chat room, do some push-ups, eat some food, use the bathroom, do some push-ups, sit on the chat room. And I got a list of all these people that said I could come and stay with them. And literally the next few years, I just traveled around America visiting computer nerds who were on IRC. If any of you are watching right now, I say that with terms of endearment. Computer nerds, and the computer nerds knew interesting people, and then other things unfolded. And eventually, like, the internet changed, and the society changed around the internet. So a lot of my early traveling wasn't particularly to go anywhere specifically. It was to meet people, kind of hoping I'd fall in love and meet somebody who would enrich my life, and I could somehow become a part of their life, and I wouldn't be in this terrible Indiana story I didn't want to be in. Although I also traveled, there was some vacillation between meeting gay guys and traveling to see my straight friends from Indiana and other straight friends I met in the path. And there's still always been a great dichotomy for me that mostly when I go to stay with gay guys, the majority of them, we'll say 98%, are like, Dominic, you're so hot, your body's so hot, you're so sexy, you're such a flirt, you're such a tease. And the straight people are like, wow, you know so much about astrology and qigong and yoga and plants, and it's so amazing, everything you know. And gay guys are like, you're really hot, I'd really like to. So, you know, I've always kind of hoped to find some kind of balance of those two, and occasionally I have with the Radical Fairies, but I've kind of really drifted away from them. But the Radical Fairies were a great thing for a period, because a lot of those kids were traveling homeless, gutter punky, like wild boys, wild children, and then it would be mixed with people who had jobs in Hollywood and whatever. very entertaining. Anyway, that's kind of my traveling story. It evolved over time, and it took a long time to be able to trust. People were like, are you a trust fund kid? Is that how you can just travel around? Because you're like rich, your parents are rich? And I was like, actually no, my parents don't give me any money. My dad said he would pay for college if I stayed and went to college, but I didn't want to stay in Indiana, so I didn't go to college. I traveled, and occasionally my mother would send me like $100 or pay off my parking tickets that got mailed to the house, or traffic tickets, whatever. But really, I wasn't being supported by my parents. I found jobs, and for the first 6 years of my traveling, I would work jobs for a while and then travel around. And then I learned how to sell massage. I did a work trade at a massage school commune in the mountains of North California, and that taught me how to sell massage, which most of my life has been the only way I've made money, and everything else I've done, I've kind of done for free or donation or random, like when I was modeling in New York City. Sometimes I got paid $150, sometimes I got paid $1,000, but it wasn't anything you could rely on. See, people are like, oh, are you a model? Is that what you do for a living? And I'm like, no, it's just a few times a year I get money. But massage, I felt like it was something that I could do, that I felt was good. I tried to be just like a sex worker, and it didn't work for me. And I didn't feel like I was doing something good for people. I didn't feel good about taking money. It never worked out in the same way. But massage institution is another story, that I felt like I could do something really good for people, and allowed me not to need a boss, not to need a table because I work on a bed or a floor. That became very, very useful. You have to have some sort of income. Millennials nowadays are really good at making everything digital, which all of us are working on doing right now. How do you make money? Hey, if you guys want to donate, you can send me some money right now. Whenever you're watching this, there's a link in the description. But it can be anything. But a lot of kids nowadays can work for big corporations or be entrepreneurs or come up with some kind of new shoe or watch or skin cover, I don't know. People can come up with all sorts of stuff and sell it digitally. There's lots of different ways, but you need to have some sort of income while you're traveling. Anyway, back to the trust fund thing. I did, and this sounds cheesy, but I did eventually tell people that I developed a feeling of trusting that the universe would take care of me, and it did. And I did get involved with yoga when I was 18, and that's a big part of yoga. The yamas and niyamas is having that, there's a stance you carry in your posture all the time of believing that God or Shiva or Brahma or the world will take care of you. I was not theistic at the time, but I thought the world would take care of me, and it does. I was raised, and I've described this about Indiana people a lot to other people in the world, that Indiana people tend to be raised in such a way that you should always be prepared for the worst case scenario, because the worst case scenario is going to happen. It very much could. So there's this like panic intrinsic in that kind of Midwestern vibe that I grew up in, that everybody's going to rape you or murder you, axe murderers, and I kind of hoped for that to happen. That's kind of how I started traveling. I was kind of hoping that the whole story could just end in a violent, quick way, but it didn't. And what I found was that people were mostly kind, generous, and had too much shit. So that allowed me to give away all my possessions because everybody had too much. So everywhere I went, people could give me books or old laptops or coats or sweaters or pants or shirts. Like for years, the only thing I ever wore was shit people gave to me. I never bought anything. I did spend a couple years without money, without a phone or a bank or a driver's license, just because I felt I needed that. As you can see, I'm kind of a counterculture person. All right, so you guys can write questions. I'll try to look at them later after I answer this guy's questions. I'm long-winded. So his first question is, what would you recommend a person to consider before traveling? So, understand what your motives are. Are you trying to be a tourist? Are you trying to see all the amazing things the world has to offer? Or are you trying to learn something about human nature? Are you trying to escape something that you don't like? Are you looking for something like a great truth, seeking? Are you looking for some mystical truth? Are you looking for a husband or a partner or a community? Are you looking for the right place to live? There's a line that I loved from a movie I watched a lot as a teenager called Naked by Mike Lee. The line is, there's an infinite number of places to go. The question is where to stay. It didn't help at all. That didn't really help either. I saw it looked like there was something on the lens. I just made it worse. So consider that. Consider what the weather's like when you're going there, so you know what you need to pack. Consider your emotional state. Consider what kind of contacts there are there, meaning like, do you know anyone? It's really great. Again, in my early days of traveling, meeting people on the internet who said I could come and stay with them meant that I wasn't being a lonely traveler tourist. I wasn't going to a hotel. I was always going to stay at someone's house, and they would take me around and be like, this is my favorite place to eat. This is my favorite place to walk. This is my, and that is a totally different way of traveling than just plopping yourself down in a culture that you know nothing about and like trying to look up stuff on the internet, which is okay. So if you have a personality that can just walk up to strangers and ask them questions, you can really go anywhere and just try to be friendly with people and get them to tell you about cool places to go, people to eat. So if you're a natural introvert, which I'm kind of an introvert and an extrovert, as a lot of us are in a bipolar kind of way, make sure that you are prepared to talk to strangers, listen to what they say, respect them, read them for bullshit and manipulation, because people like to prey on confused people. Not happened to me very much, but people have tried. And understand that when you need time alone, that you can provide that for yourself. So a lot of my early traveling, I just didn't have much money, and was kind of always at the mercy of staying with other people. And sometimes I just really needed time alone. So understand when you need time alone, and be able to have boundaries and ask the person if you can have time alone, or know that you can like go into a forest or a park and spend time alone. It's very important to maintain your own sanity and sense of self. But yeah, there's other things that, of course, like maybe get a couple words of the language, or do some research on the best way to transfer your money. It's usually have a debit card. At this point in history, I'm thinking this is all going to change rapidly. It is changing rapidly. But use an ATM. But understand that if the bank that you bank with, understand what their foreign travel laws are as far as pulling money out. Because like with my bank, at certain ATMs, it'll charge me $5 from the ATM, and then my bank will charge me $5 to get the money out, plus a $3 international transaction fee. So if I pull my money out from a bank that is in the network of my bank, then they don't charge me. Neither of those ATMs will charge me those $5 fees. So I save $10 on pulling money out. So it's good if you do that research beforehand, so you don't waste money. And there's other things like that, I guess, like should you have vaccinations? I don't tend to do them, but a lot of people consider that kind of thing. All right, we're gonna move on to the next question. How much do you carry during your travels? Okay, so when I was younger, and I see this a lot with young people, one thing to understand about younger bodies is that they're stronger, more durable, and recover quicker. So a lot of younger people take shitloads of stuff with them that they don't need. They carry tons of stuff, and I certainly did as well. It's really cool to have like a bag of herbs or potions or 1,000 different outfits because it's fun, but it's totally unnecessary. And if you can learn when you're young that it's so much more fun to travel with less, one of the kind of rules is if you travel with stuff that you don't mind losing, then that makes it so much easier. There's a lot less anxiety and worry. But the less you have, the less you have to worry about losing. And again, this is dependent on which cultures and places you're going to. You can always pack very small amount of clothes and buy things in secondhand shops. Or if you're going to stay with family or friends, they'll always have, or if you're hooking up with somebody and takes you home, everybody has too much shit. You can always be like, hey, do you have a sweater you're not using or a coat? And 99 times out of 10, they'll have a whole closet they haven't touched for 20 years or 7. Regardless, it doesn't take a lot of asking for them to let go of the excess stuff that most people live in. So carrying less is better. Letting go of the idea of preciously, oh, I need to have all this because I need to have this specific herb, or I need to have this specific potion. I do travel with essential oils, but like 1 or 2 bottles. I have some magic potions with me, but I mean, when I first started traveling, I had tons of shit in my bags, very heavy, good, strong, muscular body to carry all that. But my knees are in pain. I don't know if it's more from that or from other things. I played a lot of sports as a kid. Anyway, that's how I would answer that. Carry less. Always carry less. Otherwise, you're just gonna have to give it away when you need. If you travel with a totally stuffed pack bag at the beginning of your trip, if there is a beginning to your trip, if you're not just a forever traveler, then every time you get something new, you're gonna have to get rid of something, or you become a crazy bag person with lots of extra bags. So consider that. It's really nice to start your journey with a not fully packed bag. How do you find places to stay? So I talked about that a little bit earlier. I got blacklisted from Airbnb when they first started because I tried to chat with somebody. I told them to contact me off of the site, and they banned me forever. So I've never been somebody who's used Airbnb. I've used Mr. B&B a little bit, which is a gay version of that. I've used booking.com, but this is all in recent areas. There's a website called workaway.com or workaway.info. There's a website called World Packers and a website called HelpX. And all 3 of those are work trade situations. Actually, there's WWOOF, World Willing Workers on Organic Farms, or WWOOFing. So those are all work trade situations, which a lot of people like nowadays, because you can go to places that are more expensive, like the United States or Europe or Australia, and do a work trade on a farm or in a hostel in a city or at people's houses or some resort. That's a really cool option that we have nowadays. And then there's couchsurfing.com, which there's pluses and minuses about. But being able to stay with locals without it having to have some kind of sexual expectation is really nice. Because again, you get that thing of being able to spend some time with people who live there, and they can tell you about what, you get to see what actual life is like as opposed to tourist. Every once in a while, it's nice to get a hotel room. I tend to stay as cheaply as possible because then I don't have to worry about making money. Because obviously, most of the places I travel, I can't make money. In America, I can almost always get massage work. I've learned at this, or previous to the world transition we're in right now, I could almost always get massage work anywhere in America. But in Europe, they are used to paying a lot less than they are in America. And of course, in places like Mexico or Southeast Asia, the massage is like $10. So you can't live off of that in that same kind of way. You have to make your money before you go a lot of the time, unless you're an internet entrepreneur. But finding places to stay, it's like, are you willing to pay money, or are you willing to pay attention, trade time to be with people, do work? And if you are the kind of person that's a hypersexual person who just loves having sex, hooking up with people is a great way to travel. Of course, they say it's a great way to learn languages, to fall in love with somebody, or at least have sex with them a lot and spend time with them. And there's nothing like the seasonal version of romantic love to get somebody to open up and tell you all about their life and show you all the amazing things. So, using all the 1,000 hookup apps and stuff we have nowadays is a great way to, when you travel, you can find them in the grid, or you can premeditate that. You can search for cities ahead of time and meet some people that are like, hey. And a lot of people I've noticed nowadays, because back in the early internet days, most of the people that were online were computer nerds, as I mentioned earlier, and they were more social recluses, that they didn't seem to me as anxious as people are nowadays on the internet. So tons of people were like, come and stay with me. It might have been that I was 19. People are superficial and love young people. So, but nowadays I find that, and my older, even friends that are older than me, tend to do this thing where they will go to a place and rent a room, as opposed to stay with people, so they don't have to put up with the craziness of people or the unreliability of people. But then if it happens that you meet someone amazing when you're there, you can always check out of your hotel room and go stay with them. Okay, so what feelings does it naturally bring to one's consciousness during travels? There's always loneliness. There's always wonder. there's always a sense of we can only see what we know. So when you go into foreign cultures, the first impression is always wrong because you're seeing it from your lens. So the cool thing about that is what motivates a lot of people to be tourists, the kind of people who spend one day in Paris and then one day in Budapest and I spent 3 days in Cologne, it was amazing. Those people who travel like that, I'm not denigrating you, forgive me, I'm a different person, but the thing that's really attractive about that is you never get below the surface in any way, and you never see the places for what they are. You just see them for what you're projecting on them from what you know from your own culture. To really know a culture, you have to spend time in it, and I mean like probably years, but even a few months usually helps me disillusion myself from my projections from my own culture. And again, like a little example of this, when I went to Asia last year, there was a lot of like, oh, these people are so poor. And after living in New York City for a decade, like when I went to Sicily, I was like, oh, these people are so poor. And a lot of places give that impression of, oh, these people are so poor. But that is projecting a standard of living, an idea of living from America, which is like the most wasteful country in the world. And we also have, there's a whole bunch of downsides to our abundance. And when you get into places that are more poor, if you project that on top of it, it comes with a whole lot of cultural baggage that keeps you from being intimate with it, probably. And if you can dispense with those kind of ideas, like if you notice that your mind is making judgments on something, it's always really good at being like, well, maybe I could just see this for however this culture actually is, as opposed to what I'm thinking it is, or what my culture tells me it is. So maybe there's good kind of questions to ask. If you notice what kind of feelings come up in your consciousness, to second guess them and try to see below the surface. Although I was very enamored for many years to be in countries I couldn't understand the languages because I never had to hear them talk about politics or say stupid racist things, none of it made sense to me. So that gives one a great rush to be free of the content of people's conversation and just hear them and see them. That's a wonderful thing, because humans are beautiful and they're funny and they're great, especially if you don't have to hear them say hateful, horrible things. And all the cultural baggage from wherever you come from that would trigger you don't get it. You're not getting triggered because you're not understanding the content. It's a great superficial way to live, but eventually you can get deeper. And there's infinite levels, of course, you can get deeper. But the feelings of loneliness, people call it homesickness. And one of the reasons I'm doing this, actually, is that there's always this idea that true happiness is only real when shared. Alexander Supertramp said, and I find that very succinct. And beauty is so much more beautiful when you can share it with someone you love. So finding ways to share it, journaling, photos, posting, or traveling with a friend. But traveling with a friend multiplies the complications. Any personal storage to hold items. A good backpack is very important. I encourage small to medium backpacks, because again, the larger the backpack is, the more shit you're going to put in it and the heavier it's going to be. I'm currently using an Osprey that I walked 1,000 kilometers across Spain a few years ago with this backpack. It's designed very well, distributes the weight very well, lets the air flow through my back. Has a good amount of pockets. So do some research about your backpack beforehand. And again, the bigger it is, the more your stuff you're going to put in it, the heavier it's going to be. So that's a good recommendation. Generally a good idea to have some kind of extra waterproof insurance, although that's less of a problem now that electronics are becoming waterproof. But like your passport, you don't want to get wet, so keeping it inside of a Ziploc bag. Lots of little bags are always useful, like a stuff sack you can stuff your clothes in. And I always think having an external battery to charge your electronics is really useful. Having a rechargeable flashlight besides your phone is useful. Little tiny ones are good. But I have one like that big. little Ziploc bags for pills, like if you have medication or vitamins that you like to travel with, instead of pill bottles. The plastic bags take up less space and be flatter. If there's anything else important to say about that. Transformable packages, like right now my backpack has a loop, 2 straps on the bottom that you could like put a sleeping bag or a thing on, and I have another bag that I can stuff with stuff and then wrap it in that, so I can expand my storage if I need to without having to carry all these bags. And then if I'm not using that, I can make it really small and put it inside my bag. Something like that's really useful. Is the passport needed? Most definitely. Whatever country you live in, you could spend your entire life traveling around it and never see everything interesting. I assure you, whatever country you live in, I didn't really research where this person was from. However, traveling is more amazing the further you go from your own culture, because that's what really changes your mind. That's what really transforms your consciousness. So, well, you might be able to do it in your own state or country. But yes, definitely get a passport, and preferably 2 if you have the option to have dual citizenship. I don't yet, but I'm really trying, because it's always nice to have options. Make sure you get the full passports, not the passport cards. Have I ever been to communes? He says, often been to communes. If so, how was it? How did it function over there? So, communes are a microcosm of the society we live in. They are a mess, and they're wonderful. You get to have a family dynamic, which is always dysfunctional and loving and supportive. You can learn a lot from that kind of intensity, because again, you get to have intimate dynamics in lots of different ways. They're not just sex-based, they're not just tourist-based, they're not just romance-based, they're not just teacher-student-based. There's a whole... being able to spend time in communes is a great idea. Learning compassion and patience with their dysfunction is super good training for all other situations. And just the kind of intimacy that you get to have with a large group of people allows you to feel things deeply and learn things deeply and be present, manifested, embodied in a way that you can't when you're just sliding through things. So again, doing work trade like through Workaway or woofing or something, finding time at communes, again, like living at the commune massage school thing in Northern California totally changed my life. It gave me the ability to not need a job or a boss, to be able to sell massage for a living, as well as like a whole bunch of other skills and confidences with interacting with strangers and cooking in a kitchen, chopping, I learned so much being there. Amazing, all the things I lived. It was like my version of college, but I was only there for 10 months, 9 months. And I've spent shorter periods of time at other communes, a month, 3 months. I've never lived at a commune for a long, long time, but I've never really lived anywhere a long, long time, but I would definitely recommend it. Okay, so that's all of his questions. Thank you, sir. Let me see if anybody said anything else. Hello, Aaron. Hi, everybody. Love you. It's good to see all the people watching. I hope you like the background. Do you know how many countries and U.S. states you've been to? Urso, I remember, I think you're probably the first person I ever saw who put up one of those memes of like all the countries or states you visited. I haven't been to all the states in the United States. I've never been to Alaska or the Dakotas, but I've at least driven through all the others, which I don't really think counts. I think like spending a month there or something would be more what I would count as like learning something about the states. But I've seen a lot of them. I did count the countries I've been to, and I think it was like 33. Because I had some German girl I passed on the street, I think. I don't remember where that was, if it was Mexico City or New York City. I was like, well, I've been a traveler my whole life, and she was like, how many countries have you been to? And I said, I don't know. And she said, you must be in the hundreds. And it made me curious, and I just kind of counted in my head, and I think it was only 33. But I'm not going to recount them now. I'm not necessarily in it for the numbers. I wish you were in England. I lived in Newcastle upon Tyne, Dorset. I'll come back to England again someday, hopefully. Inshallah. Thank you. I'm very grateful to be in this beautiful part of the world. There's always trouble in paradise, but I'm grateful to be here. I love you, and I love you. And big hugs and love to you. There's a nice Dutch person here that has made me fish. I'll need to go eat some. That's before I get into the net. Yeah, I see that was some real things. Yes, Corona has grounded. Everybody has to go to your room and be grounded. We are all grounded. That's apparently a very high Hungarian attitude too. I wonder what you were referring to. Our night in Nirvana. Find heaven on earth. Yes, well, there's heaven everywhere. When I travel, I'm always looking to reassure myself that our fears are unwarranted. We live in so much fear. Yes, Americans live, well, I guess people in general live in a lot of fear. It is so great that you don't have to be afraid. The world is so kind and supporting, and I'm always so grateful to have discovered that and lived it, but it does take time to convince yourself. I am in Mexico, in Oaxaca. Yeah, oh, Americans, anybody who's watching, Urso has this comment here about how Americans get so little travel time. Quit your job and go traveling for a few months or years at some point in your life before you're old and retire. Very important. Love you, Stardust. Haven't seen you in a long time. Given the stay-at-home orders here, I'm glad Dominic found himself on the beach. Yeah, this is where I was when it happened. So it's where I am. Oh, yeah, Indiana too. Hungarian, I mean, a lot of the places in the world. Okay, I'm gonna go eat before all the food's gone. I'm glad I got to do this talk, and there's a nice background. My phone's almost out of battery. I love you guys. Donate if you're still making money and want to send me some cash. Because I can't make any money besides that for a while, unless I figure it out. I'm not an entrepreneur, but I'm gonna try. I love you. Have a nice evening. Happy Sunday. Do you want me to leave this playing so you can just watch the waves? Or should I shut it off? No, stop it. Love you. Bye-bye.